All right. So today is January 23rd. This is the biweekly SIG cloud provider meeting. I'm Andrew, your co-chair. And yeah, reminder that this is being recorded. So, whatever happens in this meeting, we will be putting it on YouTube. Okay, so let's get started. Yeah, if you could put your name in the attending list on the agenda, that'd be great, just for record keeping sake. And we'll start with the first item on the list. Claire, for 1.14 release updates. Are you on the call?
Yes, hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire. I'm the 1.14 enhancements lead. And I just wanted to hop on the SIG to introduce myself and give a general update that the enhancements freeze is January 29th. And I wanted to check to see if there were any issues in Kubernetes enhancements that the SIG is hoping make it into the 1.14 release, so that we make sure they're on our sheet and are being tracked.
Yeah, so I opened the enhancement issue per provider. I pinged a few people, but I don't think everyone followed up and updated the issue and then had a kept. So I think we should do that soon before the freeze. Do you know if the same rule applies for features that were before we moved to the enhancement repo? Do those still need keps as well?
Yes, we want all issues in 1.14 to have a kep. I believe we want it in an implementable state by the time freeze rolls around, but I think it doesn't need to be the final draft.
Okay. I'm just pasting the issues on the agenda. Just give me a sec.
I have a question that I believe I know the answer to, but I just want to be sure. A lot of the work going on right now, at least from the entry providers, is happening in secondary repos like Cloud Provider Azure and Cloud Provider GCP. Since those aren't being directly consumed by the Kate's repo, I assume that they're basically orthogonal to what you're asking about, correct, Claire?
Just to make sure I understand the question, these are issues that aren't in the enhancements repo itself, they're in other repos. I've only been looking in the enhancements repo specifically within Kubernetes. If there are other issues that are not linked to an issue in the enhancements repo, let me know what that link is so I can make sure it's getting tracked.
Okay, I mean, my thought is that since all of these are cloud provider specific and are not part of the core Kate's system, that they would actually be left to those cloud providers and not tracked by anything central in Kubernetes.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, I think I was confused about the question. Yes, if it's not expected to be shipped in the 1.14 release, then that's okay and it doesn't need to be tracked.
Well, it gets a little weirder than that because essentially the goal for those is to provide cloud provider specific versions of what we ship. So like a Google only 1.14 ship or a Microsoft only 1.14 ship.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I don't believe that the release team for 1.14 needs to track those, but I'll follow up and confirm with Aaron, who's the release lead, since I don't believe they were tracked in 1.13 either, but I want to make sure that that's correct.
Well, and it gets a little interesting because I'm not even sure there'll be a version of these for 1.14. There wasn't for 1.13. They're a brand new thing that this SIG is basically building.
Okay.
Yeah, we had an umbrella issue for that, and we did have a kep for that. So maybe in 1.13, those two things kind of qualified. But we decided that one umbrella issue is it doesn't really do a good job of capturing what every other provider, all the providers are doing at once. And so we decided to split it up, and then not realizing that splitting it up meant that we have to then create a kep per provider. So we're playing a bit of catch up right now. But yeah, follow up and let me know if if the release team like does need the KEP per provider, we can like build just like a template and then just like, you know, add a really like simplified KEP for each provider and then go forward with that.
Yeah, and I have discussed this, not this exact piece, but stuff related to this with Aaron before. So if Aaron does have any concerns, he's welcome to come and chat with me.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. On that note, is there any other 114 releases like outside of the per provider enhancements, like anything like generically cloud provider that we need to account for? Okay. All right, cool. Let's move on to the next item. So the next thing was mine. So initializers are being removed in 114, or at least that's the plan for 114. And so apparently the only thing that is using this alpha feature is the persistent volume label admission controller. Like that's the out of tree version of the persistent volume label controller. And so the compromise that me, Dims, and Jordan came up with was that we would add the remaining cloud providers in the in-tree admission controller. That way we can deprecate the usage of, or not deprecate, we can just remove the usage of initializers. And then while we add like the in-tree support back into admission controllers, then we can work on a long-term solution for the volume labeling going forward that's out of tree, but at least we have like a working solution that's in tree for now. Did everyone kind of follow that? So I guess the only action item there is like if you know a provider or if you maintain a provider that is using initializers, especially like for the persistent volume labeling, then you should let me know because by 114 that's going to be removed.
So who's doing the work to do that? Whoever's removing initializers, presumably.
So I had a PR open to add Cinder, which is a missing provider, and then yeah, Jordan is removing the initializers, and in the same PR, he's removing the usage of initializers in that controller. So like Dims thinks that no one is actually using that feature because it's an alpha feature, and he thinks like no one actually went out of their way to enable it. And so he thinks just like removing the usage is not going to affect end users. And if there are, they can always just like switch back to the in-tree admission controller, worst case scenario.
So we never removed the in-tree persistent volume label admission controller?
No, we just deprecated it. Yeah.
So are we undeprecating it?
We're not undeprecating it, but the justification.
I feel like we should restart the clock. I think it's only fair.
So the justification there is that it's not deprecated, but it's better to have one thing deprecated more than have two separate features deprecated. So like moving the logic to the in-tree version allows us to actually remove initializers, and that's better than like juggling two separate features that have to go through their own deprecation process. Yeah, it's a bit like, yeah, it's a bit messy, but like I feel like it's kind of the best path forward, especially if you want to remove the initializer feature. Cool. So on that note, I may have a PR that adds a mutating admission webhook for the out of tree version. So expect a PR for that. All right, and the next item is also mine. I created an end-to-end test that tests the node deletion logic from the cloud provider. So if you delete a node on the cloud provider, then it should delete the Kubernetes object or the node object on the Kubernetes server. So I tagged it with like a cloud provider feature tag so that it shouldn't run on pre-submit or shouldn't run on conformance. But if you specifically add like the Ginkgo focus for cloud provider, then it'll run like all the cloud provider specific tests. And so I'm going to talk to SIG testing on if this kind of testing is okay to add. And if, like my goal here is like, there should be some tag we can apply to the end-to-end test that kind of tests like the generic cloud provider features. And so we still need to add like load balancers, node registration, TV labeling, and all that stuff. So just wanted to share the PR in case anyone has thoughts or opinions on this.
And that's for, so that test will today hit the entry cloud providers.
Yeah.
And we do have some coverage on some of the things you've talked about, but you're saying we should label them with a label.
Yes. Yeah.
Label.
Yeah. And we should definitely add more, because I don't think we have tests for like load balancers and PVs.
We do.
For cloud provider specific ones? Like, do we have tests for like checking the persistent volumes are like labeled correctly based on the cloud provider? Like end-to-end tests?
We're supposed to have ones that they go across zones, so.
Okay, I'll sync up with you offline, but
right.
Yeah, it'd be great if like we can label them so that we can like just, maybe someone can have a separate CI/CD system that runs like only those tests.
Well, and eventually they shouldn't even be in K8s, or maybe in K8s, but never run there, right? Once we get everyone out of tree.
Yeah, that was the other discussion that I had with Ben. Do we need, like, is it okay to have provider specific tests in tree? Because the entire like testing framework is in tree, like, I don't know, is it like, do we want to go out of the way to support it out of tree in some way? Like, I don't know.
Autoscaling has vendored the autoscaler has vendored the E2E and has tests that are E2E tests that are not in tree, FYI.
Well, I also feel like, at some point we may want to even have things, playing devil's advocate, but we may want to have conformance tests around this sort of thing, right? I mean, I can certainly see a conformance test that says, if, Kubernetes will react properly if one of its underlying resources like nodes disappears. That seems like it is a good conformance test.
I agree with that. And these aren't cloud provider specific tests. They are yes, they are not specific to AWS, but they are provided by the cloud provider.
Yes.
The mechanism to run the test is cloud provider specific, right?
The mechanism to pass the test is cloud provider specific, right?
No, I'm thinking things like, if I want to delete the underlying node, it's a gcloud. For my cloud provider, it's a gcloud command, right?
It is today. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so like these tests require, okay, so like what's interesting about these tests is that you have to add provider feature in you're testing the provider specific feature like on the actual cloud provider interface, and you have to add a separate interface that's like the framework version of the cloud provider that lets you actually delete the node. And so like there is a discussion and we have to have around if that framework provider specifically for the end-to-end test also need to be out of tree. So I don't know what that looks like, but I figured for like GCE and AWS, like providers that are already in tree, like we might benefit from just throwing it in tree for now and then worry about it later. I don't know. What does everyone think? Should we start out a tree like from the get-go? Like, I don't know.
Well, I guess my thought is it's not even clear to me that our end state up for these tests should be out. I mean, if it's a conformance test, then I would like as much of the test as possible in K8s.
So I don't imagine these being conformance. I mean, like I can imagine it being like a separate type of conformance, like not the Kubernetes conformance, but like we can have like a cloud conformance or whatever suite.
I do think the example that was given, I can't remember who gave it, was important. Like the idea that if the machine goes away, whether it's because you deleted it or it's a hardware failure, that we don't just continue scheduling workloads to that node. That to me feels fairly important.
But that's more like a node lifecycle test. This is more just like validating that the resource is also deleted if the node is deleted. So like I can't imagine it being conformance because in a completely like cloud, if the cluster is, so conformance assumes the cluster has no like cloud provider. And so it shouldn't specifically test like cloud provider features that call into like the GCE API or the AWS API, right?
I don't think that I think the set of conformance tests we have agreed so far are able to pass without a cloud provider, but I don't think that that's a hard restriction. Like we could certainly add persistent volumes to conformance. And we do expect conformance to expand to be a more useful subset of Kubernetes.
Okay. Okay, so it seems like I need to talk to probably Aaron and other SIG testing folks to see what to do there. Okay, I'll follow up with them. Cool. All right, Federico, remember to add your ideas to the provider docs.
Yeah, so reminder for everybody that the docs site specific in general is going under refactoring, and specifically the areas that concern to us regarding the different providers and the ways that you can run and host and install Kubernetes is going under refactor. So the document link is for anybody that is interested to vote or downvote. The only one so far has been Andrew. Thank you for that. But this is happening, so if you know, different people don't share their opinion or say where their providers need to be in the documentation, it's going to be, you know, somebody in documentation is going to decide. I have a meeting this Friday, I think, to follow up on this one. So I will have more information on the concrete execution dates of these, but you know, take a look to the document, look at the category names, put where your provider should be, and I will come back to this group with updates from SIG docs.
Awesome. Thanks. Cool. So yeah, please review that doc. Cool. Is there anything else that people want to talk about? I think we're already through the agenda items, so we have 40 minutes to talk about anything else. Otherwise, we'll end early.
So I did reach out to Aaron, and he did get back to me around the question for having a KEP to track each individual cloud provider versus just KEPs for the issues in Kubernetes enhancement. And Aaron's response is that he'd prefer to have individual KEPs per provider, but is interested to hear from the SIG on what would work best for y'all.
Okay, so just kind of follow up with him and figure out what's best for 114 then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Dan B on the chat is saying my audio isn't working. Okay. He has a specific AWS specific question around requirement to use localhost name if cloud provider is AWS. Justin or Mike, do you guys want to take this? It's hard with the chat.
I can try and follow up on Slack with it. I don't know that this is a good place to try to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Dan, are you okay with that? Mike from he works at AWS can follow up with you on that on Slack. The anticipation. Okay, great. All right. If there's nothing else, then can I end early? Thanks everyone for coming.
Oh, I was going to say we have SIG AWS on Friday as well. If I was on mute, so that might be a better place for you, Dan B.
Awesome, and thank you, Monica, for updating the Google Doc to 2019. All right. Bye, everyone.